give a bit of the overview. The health and safety bit, we've got bits which we're working on at the moment. So there are areas where you need to take care, picking them down in the magazine because there's still building work going on. We have to balance have being open to the public and also carrying on with the restoration work. But we're in our sort of limited close season now. We operate the same sort of opening as the holiday park next door, and as years gone by, they keep extending their opening, so they're only closed for January and February. It's also the only time we can have a bonfire as well, to save all the rubbish for 2 months in the year. So we do let the guard down a bit during these 2 months because there was rubbish everywhere and things. Right, give you a bit of the history of the site. It's what's known as a Palmerston Folly, a Royal Commission fort. Came out of the Royal Commission in the United Kingdom, which was set up in 1859. That was significant at that time because at that point Britain had the largest navy in the world, still did up until World War II. But many of the ships were sort of the ones that Nelson would have recognised as Trafalgar. They brought steam in a lot of ships, quite a new innovative design, but it was a hodgepodge. There was no sort of one sort of type of ship that dominated like the Dreadnought came in 50 years later. What caused the problem was the French, they had a bit of a revolution in France, and they liked to have the old one, and they had a new emperor, and called himself Napoleon III. And he was actually the nephew of the Napoleon. And he mentioned Napoleon sort of worrying people this side of the channel. He started building a big new naval base at Cherbourg, which is almost like opposite Portsmouth, which is why the French are doing that, obviously they're going to invade us. And they came up with 2 very good inventions. They came up with the first ironclad warship, the Gore, and they also came up with the world's first rifled cannon and modern artillery. Now the difference those 2 things made is quite considerable, but there's a range of a smoothbore cannon, average sort of size, 24 pounder, extreme range, 1.5 miles, effective range under a mile, rifled shell, 3 miles. Straight away you see the difference that makes. Now, with an ironclad ship, cannonballs bounce off it. So you could sail every ship in the Royal Navy right up to the door and it would just be tapping on the side. So they could blow our ships out of the water at a range that Britain couldn't match. So this caused a huge panic. They said, well, how long would it take us to build a new navy? They started building HMS Warrior. And they said, well, that's 10 years probably. Not sort of navy overnight. And of course what they didn't take into account, the French had 1 ship. You're not going to invade Britain with 1 warship. But the panic set in. They said, right, okay, we need to do something else then, so we can build the navy up. We need to have new fortifications. All the old ones were built for smoothbore cannon, the Napoleonic era, and most of that was now completely out of date. So they had this huge scheme. This Royal Commission actually reported in less than 12 months. It's the only time the Royal Commission was ever reported so quickly. And came up with a massive scheme to defend the whole of the British Isles and also the Empire areas as well. Basically changed every naval port and every major port. Well, here we are on the Thames estuary. I think particularly important. Not only got the capital, London, up to Thames. You've had 2 naval dockyards at that time on the Thames at Woolwich, Deptford, Sheerness Dockyard, which is a couple of miles from where we are, and Chatham Dockyard, a few miles up the Medway. So it's really important to defend the Thames estuary and the Medway area. So there was quite an emphasis on fortification. But when it got in front of the Treasury, of course, they looked at it and thought, all that. There was going to be a line across the bottom of the Hoo Peninsula. That got knocked out quite early on. And the ones that were going to go around the south side of Chatham, they were delayed because there was a debate over whether Chatham Dockyard was actually going to survive or not at that time. It was an argument. And in the end, they closed Deptford and Woolwich and redeveloped Chatham. The modern dockyard, which is the bit now, which is all the commercial bit. And those forts weren't really completed. The last one, Fort Darwin, wasn't finished about 1900. So I came back here. Work started here 1863, quite early. It was finished about 1867-ish, but they were still working on it until 1873 when we know the guns were delivered. So it took quite a while to build these forts. They were not a quick build. And part of the problem was they were changing the design often when they went along, because the developments in armaments were changing faster than they could actually sort of build the fortifications. It was a particular problem in the Portsmouth area, I think, where they were designed for one type of gun and realised they needed something else. And the guns were getting much bigger and heavier. The guns we had here were the smallest. They were 7-inch Armstrong breech-loaders. They could have a range of about 3.5 miles. You could land a shell onto South End quite happily. What the best thing to do with South End. Whereas the old cannonballs were just plopped into the middle of the river. And so it was quite effective. Now the problem was, by the time they had built this and armed it, the armament had really moved on. And they also found that the 7-inch breech loaders were not all they were cracked up to do. The Navy used them first, if you go to HMS Warrior, that's what Warrior was armed with, and they found them to be rather ineffective because the breech seal mechanism didn't work often. So sometimes literally you'd fire and the shell would like fall out at the end or something. It worked well, but the Navy decided that wasn't reliable enough for them. And so they moved on to what's called the rifle muzzle loader, and the army quickly followed suit as well. So it was like going backwards. The early breech loading was a good idea, but it wasn't really good enough. So went on to rifle muzzle loader. We never had them here. What happened here, we got to about, in the 1880s, and decided, right, we need to rearm Slough Fort, and we're going to now use the absolute modern armament, which is disappearing guns under the Moncrief system. So you have a pit, you have a gun in the bottom of it, you load the gun using hydraulics, the gun pops up, fires at the target, and the recoil brings it down again, ready to charge again. And because these guns are much bigger, they couldn't put them into the actual fort. It was far too small. So it was a very radical idea. They chopped the fort down by 2/3. There's 2/3 higher than this. They had all barrack accommodation on top. That was chopped down. They buried the front of it with lots of earth to make a nice hidden embankment. And then a wing battery each side with disappearing guns in it. Now, they themselves had quite a short history. Literally 10 years on from that, they think, well, these are a bit slow now and obsolete, we need something else. And so they decided they'd move to modern armament, which would be the 9.2-inch breech loader. And but then there was a bit of a squeeze on from the Treasury again, and they only gave permission, something called the Munro report, and basically the Treasury people say, you can have this, you can't have that. Very familiar with military today. So they only in the end rebuilt one battery, our East Wing battery over there. That rebuilt with modern artillery, which stayed in place until the end of the First World War. The West Wing battery was decommissioned and virtually got very forgotten about. Now what makes this site quite unique is we've got bits of the original fort. We've got one gun pit from the disappearing gun era, and we've got both guns pits from the later period. And also on the roof, we have had, where World War II, they mounted two 12-pounders anti-grenade lasers. What I'll do now, I'll start looking around here. Have a look, right? Please do ask questions. I'll make that the answer. What you realise is you come around here as opposed to Amberley, everything is much more condensed, right? Much smaller scale. Now the guard room effectively controlled all access and egress out of the fort. If you're coming in, you have to report here. If you're going out, you have to be inspected before you left. It was manned 24 hours a day. Now the peacetime garrison here was very small. It was about less than 30 men. They were full-time members of the Royal Artillery. They had an officer, a couple of NCOs, and some very bored sort of young men, which actually became a bit of an issue. We'll come to the story in a minute. Now, typical with all military establishments, you've got two cells as lock-up. If you want to go and have a look, they're very uncomfortable. Yeah.
Shut the door quick.
Good idea. Now, there is a sort of almost Amherst connection here. You can pull the door back, Louise. The two cell doors actually came from Kitchener Barracks. Remember the cell block there? They were going to put those on the bonfire, and we were able to negotiate to get them. Now, I don't know if you notice on the inside of the door, it's actually plated with metal so that the soldiers couldn't sort of damage it. If they kicked it, they could do it. So these are actually original features which we were able to recover somewhere else. It all saves money, and I really love the idea of always salvaging something rather than getting used to it. Now these walls were not here at all, they were gone. In fact, where the windows are, those have been knocked out to make stables. This was used as stables from about 1960, and the Fort Forces finally moved out in 2018. We got involved in 2030, so there was a crossover which actually caused quite a lot of tension, shall we say, when the horsey people were still here until their lease ended and they were sort of left. Because the background story on this was I never planned to get involved in this. As those of you know, I'm heavily involved with Fort Amherst. It was never my plan to get involved here. My good long-term friend Victor Smith stitched me up well and truly over this. What happened was when Haven were planning a big redevelopment of the park, and any who visited the Haven Park, it has grown hugely. They were told by Historic England and Medway Council, in order to approve your plans, you've got to do something with Slough Fort, because they own the Slough Fort area. They'd leased it on a peppercorn for stables, for years, as the people who owned it before then had done previously, but the fort was in a really bad state. It's scheduled, but no work has been done. And also, it's quite unique with its scheduling as well. The bit we're in now, the oldest part, is actually listed Grade 2 star, but the wing batteries and the glacis, the bank in front of it, is scheduled ancient monument. This is the only fortification I'm aware where you've got this dual designation. And even to this day, Historic England still can't give a proper explanation as to why that happened. We took this on a number of quite small grants. We did this all in-house. The only thing that wasn't in-house, the joinery work has all been done by a company called Faversham Joinery, who we've used right from the start and given us very good prices. They don't make much money out of the work for Slough Fort. I think they do it because they like the project. Like when we had these windows done, we've got grants for it. Their part of it was they donated privately. In fact, the grant for these windows came from one of the very last European grants that was available, a scheme called LEADER. The hardest thing I'd ever applied for. I've been applying for grants, most of my adult life, and this one was the worst one ever to apply for. You were jumping through hoops of fire backwards, to get a few £1,000s. You wonder why the money never got spent, but we got the money and we got the job done. Now, a bit of research, we knew there were equipment racks on the wall, but we didn't have an example. But some of you were aware that when at Fort Amherst we did Command of the Heights, there was a discovery made down on the Gunwharf site of some underground casemates, which had been converted into a store at some point, and one of the walls was covered in these Victorian equipment racks. I borrowed one of those racks. And it just seemed to be laying there on the floor. I managed to persuade the person at my council who had the key to lend it to me. And I borrowed one of the racks, and we had these manufactured. In fact, we just had some more made now, which are going to be in the new cafe building, which we'll see in a few minutes. And so this took about 2 years to do. Okay, it's quite a slow thing, but we're doing this all with our own volunteers. all in-house. And it was also during the lockdown period. Now my lockdown project was this lovely stove here. We bought this as a collection of broken bits on eBay for 100 quid, and I spent literally 6 months rebuilding it. Down here on the owner's dog, and it's actually full working condition now. And it is actually almost identical to the one that used to be there. We know that because I did a visit with the Old Medway Military Research Group back in 1976 here. I looked at one of my old photographs. The range was there, and it's, the only thing different is that the manufacturer's name was different. It's exactly the same style. So we've actually got a full replacement of what was there. And other things we've sort of made, even like the table, that was made by one of our volunteers. You know, so we've tried to make it as authentic as possible, but also to do things as cost effective as possible as well. Right, and the electrics, most of these we installed ourselves, and we got permission with Historic England to use some steel galvanised conduit. They said that's what they would have had in World War II. We're happy with that. But a couple of smaller rooms now. I'm just going to open the door. I've put in some of it. I've put in the bin, but you have to sort of try and set things with the label that fits more to it. Yeah. And also in here, we've got our strangest donation, actually, in here. This is the Officers WC. And the very first scout troop we had here, which was Sea Scouts, who used our grounds for camping, the Scoutmaster said, I've got an old Victorian loo in my garage, would you like it? So we took it and refurbished it. And there it is. That included the cistern and the ceramic and the old seat as well. And it is very similar to what we know was there. Yeah, possibly. All the lead piping and stuff. Yeah. So we're fortunate. One of those still in place that were able to remanufacture them. And there were also steel shutters on all the windows. And they also had little slits so you could fire or rifle. So the whole of the fort was fortified from the inside, so you could ward off the attack. Where we came through the gate there, if you look at the top of the door, you'll see pulleys built a drawbridge. So, how that operated, okay, where'd you get your signs from? We do have artifacts, yes. But they're all in store at the moment because of having to close out here and work on the
So you can't let you fix it up? That doesn't.
Right. Get a tractor, get it yourself. I'm busy. Build communications.
On the roof, sorry, I always sing when I'm up here. So when you go in those tunnels, do you always say good morning? Say good morning. Go up there, say good morning.
Come out there, didn't it?
They go to dockyard permission. The problem I had was with the garrison board, they were through boards, and then sort of lots of issues with the locals. So the garrison here used to regularly drink in the back head of the large stone, pour the British, they had money in their pockets. The locals were all farmers, no money in their pockets. huge fight, and they totally wrecked and destroyed half the fighting there. So it made an absolute place. That's what we found out today. It even took me out as far as Scotland, the story we went about this huge fight. In fact, the entire police force from Rochester was brought out to arrest them and take them away.
How many men were garrisoned here?
It was about 30. At the wartime garrison would have been about 150, so they'd have needed to be intensive for that, wouldn't have been enough barrack accommodation. So all they had here was a peacetime contingent. Their job was to look after the guns, stores, keep the place operating. And this was typical actually of all the forts, that Britain invested all its money in the Navy, so they didn't want to have a large standing army manning forts. So what they did was they had a small garrison, and they had a very large reserve through the volunteer movement. They were unpaid volunteers, the forerunner of the territorial army in effect. And in wartime, they would be called to the colours, mobilised, and come in and actually command the fort. And in fact, the local regiment was based on Gravesend, the coast regiment that was responsible for manning all the forts on the Hoo Peninsula. And they'd do their annual camp here for 2 weeks, doing their sort of their wartime job. But peacetime, it was just the small garrison that had to do there. It was very isolated in those days.
How important is that?
Yeah, that's part. They would try and marry a sort of fairly rich woman for the dowry, and they'd stick her in a farmhouse on the marsh, and they should take the full. They wouldn't worry about the looks or anything in the woman. It was just about hurry up and get malaria and die.
Any sort of dowry to go along with that?
We didn't get any dowry from them. But having said that, they're not a bad name. The only problem is the drain, and we got an estimate of £5,000. We're picking up our maintenance budget. So they've been quite And bearing in mind, when this was built, this was 2/3 higher than it is now. It's built as a great tower. The idea was, look at me, I'm here, you come up this entry, you're going to get glass. Right, there's South End, across the shrouded in mist, that you take you and get what was really funny was, as we looked at the geography of the Hoo Peninsula, we realised that the best way to stop invasion is to blow up the sea wall. So you flood the whole of the low-lying part of the peninsula, all the way from Gravesend, but there's one point that doesn't work, which is where we're standing. This is a high point. This ridge runs right the way through the Hoo Peninsula, right to Rochester. So if you landed quite a small port here, they could then be shooting to Rochester, capture the bridge there within a couple of hours, outmaneuver the dockyard, be in London for tea time. And so they realised that to prevent that happening, you need to put a fort here to act as an anti-invasion defence. And it also guards the rear of the defence of the grain. There's 3 fortifications of grain built at the same time. This acts as sort of the close their back door. But the plan was, if there was going to be an invasion, they would blow the sea walls, and then the fort here would then be the first line of defence. Now, interesting, when you get to World War II, you get exactly the same thinking. After Dunkirk, they decided that the fort was reoccupied and taken back by the army, and they decided this was an ideal place. Military intelligence somehow felt this is an ideal invasion spot. The curious thing was, they came up with this idea. They weren't going to land by boat, they were going to land by seaplane. And don't know how many seaplanes had, you know, that size. And apparently they were going to land here. They reckon they can land a force of up to 3,000 men here. That's a lot of seaplanes, really, isn't it? I don't know how many men you can get in a seaplane. But it'd be buzzing, wouldn't it? Because they decided it would be difficult to come through the estuary because of the guns further down. And also, we've got booms across as well. And they thought they could land almost like a raiding party here, which would be a distraction, a diversion from the main Operation Sea Lion happening down on the coast of, you know, Folkestone and Dover. The idea being, if you did land troops here, you're very close to London, but you know, the military lose their nerve, send their reserves here rather than where the main base is. That was the thinking. But on the early history, the fort was actually disarmed in 1918. They moved the guns down to a new battery on the Isle of Sheffield, Fletcher Battery. And the fort was shut down, sold off 1929 by auction. And the landing front was bought by a company that set up the first, if you like, holiday park. They had a travelling caravan park here in the 1930s. They even had a fixed fun fair here. They had a scenic railway similar to the one at Dreamland at Margate. And you can still see it on the 1940 aerial photograph. And the fort itself became a zoo. This guy set it up and it was called the Mad Lion Man of Allhallows. A guy called Bill Cahill. And he had lions in these rooms down the bottom there. You could come and visit and look at the lions. And when I first moved here, which was 2001, I realised there wasn't actually a history of Allhallows. I thought, well, I'll move here, I'll write one. And I interviewed this old lady in her 80s who said she could still remember the roar of the lions when she was a little girl. And her mother said, "Let's go to sleep, the lions are coming in." I don't know whether that's what describes back then with parenting, you know, but you go to sleep, all the lions are coming in here. Yeah. And the first military involvement was late 1930s. The army built a big anti-aircraft battery in Allhallows, where the school is now. 4.7-inch guns, and we know that they took over the magazines for the later battery. They took those back as ammunition storage. And we even found a bit of broken mess crockery from anti-aircraft regiment base, which was based in Greenhithe, when we were digging out one of the jump things. So there's the evidence for that there. It wasn't until 1940 you get the invasion threat. The army came back and really took control of it, and beat it up again, and then the invasion moved. Which takes us now pop next door. The Royal Engineers surveyed the fort and put in place 2 emplacements of 12-pounder quick-firing guns. There was another one where we were standing before. The reason that emplacement was gone, in the 1960s, the holiday park built a huge water tank there which filled up the whole of that space. And we uncovered the emplacement here. We wanted to get a gun to go here. And this is a 12-pounder, and there's an interesting story behind this gun as well. I've known for a couple of years there was some guns tucked away in Gosport next to the Naval Armament Museum. And I inquired with them about it, and they said, no, they're not our property at all. They said they belong to an antique dealer in Portsmouth Dockyard. And he'd had these guns for about 20 years or more. And the curator of the museum said, well, good luck in dealing with it. It was a bit of a flyboy. Anyway, I started trying to negotiate with her, and he really didn't want to even talk about the fact that the guns were there. Spoke to the museum curator. He said, oh, let me have a word. I might be able to do something for you. I mean, after a couple of weeks, got an email saying, yeah, you can have the gun for 500 quid. That was a right mess. All it had was, it had no shield on it, had no breech. This here, the gusset was badly rotted, it had the plate. And it was obviously this gun had been underwater for a long time. They had another gun next to it, which was a 4.7-inch quick firing gun. Now I worked out quite quickly that this is a 12-pounder, that was a 4.7. That's the armament of a British World War I destroyer. 4.7 on the front, 12-pounder on the rear. And so these guns must have been on a First World War destroyer. Now, bearing in mind the rust of things, these have been underwater for a very long time. So these guns have been taken off a sunken destroyer. So any sunken destroyer has to have been a war grave. Therefore, if it's a war grave, you're not supposed to touch it. So I think this guy has bought these guns off some divers and then realised he had something he could possibly sell or move on easily. And he tried to tell me they came from a now defunct military museum in the Midlands, and I could find no trace of them. So this is interesting. And also when we got to it, there were no plates on, the brass plates had disappeared. I thought, but we did actually find one when we were restoring it. There was one that was tucked away down here, he'd missed. And from the plate, we know it was made in the Royal Carriage factory at Portsmouth, and it was actually made 1890 something, so it's quite early. So almost certainly it was a hot destroyer. So we can't say definitively, even though we've got a catalogue number on it, the National Maritime Museum can't tell us which vessel it came off, unfortunately. So almost certainly say this was an illegal gun. So we transported it back here, it cost us another £500 to transport it back, and we got a small lottery grant, £8,000 to do the restoration and have it sort of fixed in place here. We can actually fire it in effect. We've rigged it up so you can fire it with a shotgun, a blank shotgun cartridge. But it does annoy the caravan people. Most of the guns available have already been taken by other places, so we were lucky to get this one. The other gun we might have noticed was the anti-aircraft gun when it came in the port, which is a 3.7 inch. That's also got interesting history. That is actually on loan to us in respect from the Red Sands project. This is a bunch of absolute lunatics who are trying to restore one of the gun towers of the Red Sands seaport, several miles out into the estuary. They were able to obtain this gun, and it actually came off one of the seaports in the estuary, off one of the naval gun platforms. There were 6 of them recovered by the American Air Force back in the early 1980s. One went to Newtown Fort at Gravesend, and the others went actually bizarrely up to Scotland. And this is one of the ones that went to Scotland, which we've been able to bring back. It was actually pointing out towards where it was out in the estuary, around the naval towers out there. And it's unlikely that the Red Sands guys are ever going to be able to move their gun out there, so it's here really for the duration, so to speak.
Area, but that's concerned. You look at the
On it. It was built for 2 purposes. It's a war shelter safe place to show, but also it was like the recreational facility for the men. It was like their nappy, if you like. It was until a few weeks ago, it was our temporary museum. But because we have to get rid of our site caravan, we've turned half of it into our new office and trust room. This bit is going to be a lecture room.
What are you guys doing there then?
How to get it up there. No, that's the other one.
Did you order legs with the other ones? Oh,
Yes, we've got them. They should be in there.
I wondered if they are. I wondered if they've gone out.
Oh, looks good. It's almost straight as well.
Rebuilt in the 1880s when they cut the top of the fort off, built the two wing batteries. What they did, each battery had a 9.2 inch gun and a 6 inch gun. This is the 9.2 inch gun pit, and you see here sort of
I've got it up in time, haven't I?
yeah, good, look, well done. That's how it was operated. Literally, when you're down here in the loading position, you can safely load the gun. The shells are whizzing over your head, and then when you're ready to fire, the gun pops up, fires, then recoil, brings it back down again, ready into the reload position.
How quickly could that be done then? Is that minutes or seconds? Or
It was
half
not
an
a
hour?
quick process.
No.
This is one of its problems. It was brilliant from the point of view of being safe and also keeping it hidden. The whole fort became a hidden battery then. If you looked out and see, all you see are these bumps of earth. What gave it away, it still had a flag mast on the top. The French would say, wonder why that Union flag is on top of that mound there.
And presumably the second time they came past said no, it was there.
Yeah. And so the 6 inch gun pit is over there somewhere, alright? We know it's a few hundred yards in that direction. This picture here is a photograph taken in the 1970s of it. And we're very unlikely to ever be able to open that up. Now, if you see on this plan here, we've got an underground magazine, which we've got no access to. That curve on that concrete there is what you've got there. So literally, with that underground magazine, it's just about where those old railings are. So if you dug down there, you get into the underground magazine. Sorry? These are the ammunition lockers. And it'll make more sense when we go and look at the upper battery. So you've stored your already used ammunition with your cartridges and shells, then you brought more stuff up from the magazine as you fired it on. Now we only did restoration work on this about 18 months ago. This was our real Cinderella part of the fort, the dumping ground. It had been turned into a sort of sand school by the riding stables. They'd smashed out the concrete there, that was smashed out. Where you're standing there had all been smashed out. They dug out right to that bank to make this sort of rectangular area, put sand in, the horses going up and down in. They caused huge damage before it was scheduled. And so we put that back, we excavated out, found the road underneath the old sand school. Most of the, you see those gullies there were missing growth, and we remade those ourselves with the mould and made them on site. Prepared the concrete, and then we also dug out the pit. This was actually concreted over, and we found this lovely old fire ring in the bottom of it. I didn't know that was even in there. We dug it out. Yes, that's how it's going. It's actually quite unique. Apparently, this particular part of the gun was only ever built in two places, here and on a battery on the other end. What we did, we've got quite something you weren't expecting it. Obviously someone had tried to smash it out in the past. You can see there's chunks of this is cast iron. They've probably used a mechanical excavator or something to realise it wasn't worth the game. It's too much too difficult. So they just built it in. One of the sad things is that over the years, anything metal here has been taken, strapped on everything. That's why these lockers, they would have had steel frames and doors on them. You can see that little indent in the concrete. There's a ring there to help hold it. Position the gun in place it's lowered in. There was you see the gun port there. There you've got the bottom of the gun port, which is there, you see. So everything above that has been chopped off. So it was much taller than it was now. And it also solved a bit of a mystery because we were never sure where the magazines were. And there were some people who felt that they were under another level underneath that had been sealed off because there wasn't evidence to suggest that like steps that seemed to go to nowhere. I never bought into that. I always believed they were on this level. Now the only way we could prove that with no drawings is to find where the guns were, and then you can work out where the magazines were. So when we excavated this, as soon as we found that opening there, which was filled in, we took the infill out, we knew that was the gun floor. So the magazines need to be directly below it, which is the ground level. So that solved it. And it was important to do that because without original drawings, you're just making guesses as to what was here. And it does prove that it was a granite face. They put this like tar on it to waterproof it when they buried it. Our big disappointment was when we dug this out, we were half hoping we'd find guns. Because what often happened when they did this remodelling, which was done on lots of other forts, the old guns which were obsolete, they often pushed them into the ditch, then filled the ditch in and buried them. They did that at Harwich, they found the guns there, there's other places. When we dug, we went right down to the bottom of the ditch, and the only thing we found that the fill was absolutely clean. There wasn't even a clay pipe bowl in it. There was no rubbish at all.
Further then, it might not.
But what it could have been, but you would have just dropped the gun in front of the gun emplacement. But you know, there could be guns left or right, but we haven't got permission or the money to dig there. So we had to choose one to do. And this was the one, and there was nothing there. It was a disappointment, but you know, you don't miss what you've never had.
You must take it easy, no?
Well, we could, in the sun from right out in the estuary. And so the new concept was hidden defences. They chopped the top off, completely buried it.
It's called the twiddle profile.
Yeah, it is twiddle profile. Yes. The fact the rear was pure twiddle, you know, with earth ditches, with a steep bank and an unclimbable fence in the bottom. The fence similar to this, but much higher that we've got here. This we negotiate with our landlords. That was the compromise to have these put in there. It still cost them a lot of money, but they would have preferred something a bit more sort of. Nothing went off as I say, it's all on this bank here. When we dug out the bit at the front, that's the first bit on this bank here. And when we dug the rest of it out, we recreated the bank that's been behind. So the idea is, if you're looking from the road, you don't see the back of it. So the guns over here, they were 9.2 inch mounted on the far deck, which means they're open mounted with the guns up the parapet. They had a range of about 17.5 miles. So they can take out, you know, a ship way out. Oh, they can look out petty craft.
So we kind of smacked it out then.
Yes. In fact, if you look put back, these grids you see here are going to cover up the hydraulic and electrical pits. They used to have a checker plate originally. We decided we weren't going to go for that for two reasons. One, you can't see what's in the pit, and also it means we'd have had to have done quite extensive repairs to the broken concrete, which would have required scheduled monument consent. So we're having these grills which basically freestand, so they don't require consent. He's not sure whether Historic England would have given us consent for that. The tricky bit here, we've got these concrete repairs to do later this year. We've worked out how we're going to do it, that it's going to be a lot of shuttering and a lot of beach sand. It's quite poor quality. The 1900s type of concrete is really sharp. It really is bad. And that's actually caused us quite a few problems, and I'll show you when we go down below. Because what they did, the original small Victorian factory is still there, and they did that to it, still something. The way it's got integrated Well, that's getting to sort of bunch up a little bit now. You'll sort of squeeze in. Now, in ancient terms, everything is natural to this Victorian magazine and statues. That way, the greater is moving. And there were no fittings in place at all with regards to apart from two doorways, this one and that one there. Everything else had to be remade. All these lighting recesses had to be remade. The most TV show on the is black statement. Never completely dry, if you drop it, it's definitely. So you have to have your most steady-handed handwork in here. Everything in here had to be non-ferrous, brass, copper or gunmetal. The men changing the special uniform had no pockets. Didn't get why there were no pockets. Yes. No cigarettes, matches or tobacco.
Or mobile phones.
Or mobile. And that's take off their stud nail army boots and wear slippers. Yep, so they couldn't make any sparks. The cartridges were moved on trolleys with bronze wheels so they wouldn't make a spark. Now those actually run deeply relevant to my work. They relate to the Victorian magazine. Talk about equipment here for that way for the 9-inch
And it was pointed out that you're going
Thank you.